In chapter 21 of 1 Samuel, we find David, it's a fairly short chapter, we find David on the run from Saul, and he's going to be on the run from Saul for the rest of Saul's life, so this is pretty much his lifestyle. But as he runs from Saul, in verse 1, he comes to a place called Nob, to the high priest, Elimelech, and he has some men with him at this time, and as he comes through, he comes to the priest, and we notice here, and this is important, is that he is deceitful again for the second time. He lies to Elimelech. He says, the king has commissioned me in a matter, and so forth, and he's not going to tell him what that matter is, but he's hungry, and so he says to him in verse 3, do you have some bread here that we and my men could eat? So the priest says, well, I don't have any of normal bread, but we have some of the consecrated bread. Now, this is the bread also known as the showbread that was put out in the tabernacle every day. A new 12 loaves of bread were placed in the tabernacle every day to represent the tribes of Israel. And they were hot bread laid out and then was not to be eaten by the normal person. And so the only bread that the high priest had available was that bread that was being replaced by new bread. And he tells David, you can have that bread, verse 4, if as long as the young man have kept himself from women. In other words, they had to be clean, ceremonially clean, in order to partake of that bread. So David confirms they were. Whether they were or not, I don't know I don't know how to know about that, but surely they were. And so they take of that bread and they eat of that bread. And then he goes on to say, I need a sword. I don't have any sword for the battle. And in verse 9, the priest says, well, there is a sword here. It's a sword of Goliath, the sword David used to cut Goliath's head off. It's been stored there. And so he said, you can have that. Of course, that would be a very large sword, but there's none like it, David said. So he took the sword and he moved forward. But what's really important here at this point is that verse 7, there's a guy there, an Edomite, by the name of Doeg. And Doeg is hearing all this. He knows David is fleeing from Saul, and he knows that he has taken the showbread, and he has taken the sword, and he is an Edomite. He's not a Jewish man. He's not a Hebrew, and that's going to play out big time a little later on. But we'll stay with our story for just a moment. David then in verse 10, he arises and he goes into the king of Gath, Achish, and there the king of Gath, Achish, is concerned about David. He knows about David. He knows about his heroics and the songs they sing about him in verse 11. Saul has slain his thousands, David his 10,000s, and he's very concerned that David is now joining his forces. This is a guy who has had a long, very powerful military record, and he is son-in-law of King Saul. What do we want him for? This is concerning him. And when David recognized he was in danger, he, verse 13, disguises his sanity before them, and he acted insanely, and he scribbled on the doors of the gate, and then he let saliva run down his beard. And Achish said to his servants, behold, you see the man behaving as a madman. Why do you bring him to me? I love this next line. Do we lack madmen, or do I lack madmen? He has enough crazy people in his own kingdom. He says, I don't need another one. So we have, again, David defending himself through deception. Now, this is the same man who went before Goliath and killed him in the name of the living God. This is the man who depended upon the Lord in that way. This is the man who's dependent upon the Lord in other circumstances. But here, as he's running from Saul, he is lying to the high priest. He's lying to the king of Gath, and he doesn't see any way apparently to trust the Lord with his circumstances. And so he is deceptive. Again, this is a fatal flaw in the character of David that we will look at later on in the life of David. But before we do that, before we finish up today, I want to go to Psalm 34. Psalm 34 apparently was written during this time. It says that the superscription that it's a Psalm of David when he feigned madness before Abimelech, who drove him away, and he departed. Now that confuses us because the high priest is Elimelech, not Abimelech, And he, as far as we know, didn't drive him away. Achish recognized him as a madman, but apparently this is in that period of time. And so we see why David is behaving the way he is, even though we're confused a bit on what this means. We find that he is fearful. In verse 4, he mentions fear. Verse 7, he mentions fear. Verse 9 twice. Verse 11, he's afraid. And we also know we're not always at our best when we're in fear. And we also find that he is in desperate straits. In verse 17, the righteous cry and the Lord hears and delivers him out of all of his troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And so David is crushed in spirit. He's running from his father-in-law. Things are turning out very poorly for him. So he's fearful, he's confused, and he's crushed in spirit. And so this psalm reflects those things as he cries out to God for what he needs from the Lord. So this Psalm 34 helps us a great deal in understanding what is going on in the life of David at this time. He's a human. He's a man. He's flawed. He loves the Lord, but he's a flawed human being. And sometimes, like you and I, he makes mistakes.